Let's learn a little bit more about our tribal headmen as you're anointed. Jerry, tell us a little bit about some of the early jobs that you may have had before you began your professional career.
Well, they were entirely unrelated to my professional career. The first job I remember was being hired, well, for the first 2 or 3 years at $0 or pennies an hour. At the drugstore. So we lived in the country. I'd hitch a ride into school with my dad, and in front of the store would be these big stacks of magazines that the magazine distributor had dumped off just on the sidewalk. So we had to, being my brother and I, would go in and we had to pull all the old out-of-date magazines out of the rack and insert the new ones. So finally we rebelled and we were given a raise to 25 cents an hour. So I worked at the drugstore for quite a few years. Got quite good at wrapping packages because all the wealthy doctors in town would wait until Christmas Eve to buy their wives presents, and then they would come in and they wanted either the largest box of chocolate on earth or the most expensive box of cosmetics on earth, and we had to wrap them up. But then I worked for a surveyor, as a lineman for several years, and then I went off. I graduated from high school, and that summer I went to St. Simon's Island, Georgia, and worked in my uncle's bank that summer and 3 successive summers, earning $175 a month, which was hard to pay the rent and live and put gas in the car. But you don't object to going to St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I had a complimentary pass to the beach club at the Cloister, which helped, although they didn't pick up the tab. So that's kind of what I did before I went to college.
Wayne, how about some of your early jobs?
Well, I started out, probably my earliest job after cutting grass for a living for 2 or 3 years when I was little, just the neighbors, that kind of thing. I became a caddy at Dayton Country Club, and used to go walk up 4 blocks, get on the bus, take the bus down, walk 4 blocks to the country club, and morning till night for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. When I got to be old enough, I got to be 16, I guess, I got a job in a filling station working for 2 ex-Army guys who got out of the Army and came back, and during which time, interestingly enough, I was involved in a tornado. Saw it coming right down from Xenia, right down the street toward us, and just lifted up and took everything out of the gas station but me, and that was quite an experience. My next job, when I got to be 17 or 18, I think I was 17, so I had to cheat a little bit. I worked for Litzy, which was a television, hard goods, dishwashers and so forth on the west side of Dayton, not the best side of Dayton by a long shot. And I would deliver TVs, washing machines, things of that ilk to places that you just knew they were coming back to the store within 3 months. You just knew that wasn't going to last. Among other things, I would put up TV antennas. Back in the day, we had all TV antennas up on the roof. And I remember being on one outing. I was not very good with heights. We call them the Rain Hotel. We had to go all the way up to the Rain Hotel. And on the roof, and the fellow that was working with me said, well, just lean over and bring it from underneath the roof around this way, and I'll hold your feet. I said, well, what about you leaning over and I'll hold your feet? He said, okay. Good Chucky, he right down, didn't bother him. Another time on that job, we were on the top of a restaurant putting used to strap these antennas to the chimneys sometimes with bands. And I was up there, and the fellow wanted to move his truck out of the road, so he went down. And I'm standing there, sitting on the chimney and waiting for him to come back up. And he comes back up, we tighten one band, the whole chimney drops straight down. I've been sitting on it, waiting for him to But so those were some of my early experiences. And when I got to college, by those years, I was co-oping. As I mentioned, I did my undergraduate work at the University of Cincinnati, so I was always busy at a co-op job, which were Frigidaire and like things of that nature. And then later on, when I got my MBA, I was working full time and did that at night.
Blair?
The earliest job I can remember was at Chautauqua in Ohio, and I had a Sunday job of serving up what in Ohio is called pop. We call in Pennsylvania sodas. And it had an ice chest, and we had just loaded up bottles of pop. And for 5 or 10 cents, I would, at this concession stand, I would do this all on a Sunday afternoon. Then I graduated to dipping ice cream. Then I graduated to, I got the best job at 15. My father, I think, talked the maintenance man of this place, the Chautauqua, Ohio, to work on the maintenance. And I painted posts, and we fixed roads, we trimmed trees, I learned about scying at the time. That's a large scythe. And then he let me run the great mower, which was a huge mowing machine, which had sickle blades on it. I mowed. So anyhow, that was the next. Then the ultimate job at that place was being a lifeguard. And so at 16, I became a lifeguard. I think you had to be 16 to become a lifeguard. I did that for 2 years. And then as I went to college, I worked for a general contractor for a year in a summer job. Then I, from there on, I did, really basically I got into medical school. And in medical school, I had some jobs. I passed the New York Times Sunday paper around the neighborhood in New York City, which was no light job. That paper weighed a lot. Moving those things around. I worked at a blood bank at Memorial Hospital, in which the days of large amounts of blood being used for operations was the standard. And so I remember working on Sunday nights at the blood bank, and we had to cross-match unbelievable numbers of pints of blood for the Monday operations there. Those were transition of my jobs from dipping out bottles of pop to to preparing bottles of blood.
But Dad, how about your remodeling of the hotels that your dad or something?
Well,
that's how where you did all the electrical work?
Construction. I try to avoid the electrical work. I never was very good at electrical work. I was a little bit worried about that. I learned about plumbing because the plumbing guys always liked me to be underneath the
Sink.
Well, actually underneath the crawl space.
Ooh.
I was a crawl space man. And then putting up wallboard and those sort of things I learned to do. Which probably was a very good thing as a life job. Learned to do a number of things.
Most definitely.
I'll give you an addendum to the crawl space.
My grandpa is Wayne Lyon, and he's the best grandpa in the world. When I think of Papa, I think of his laugh, of course, and it just, when you come downstairs, I mean, you just know it's our group because you just hear his like tremendous, like thunderous laugh, and you're just kind of put a smile on your face. One of my favorite things to do with in Chautauqua with Papa is he'd always like let me use his scooter, so I just ride around his little scooter around Chautauqua, which is kind of funny. But and then as for Uncle Jerry and Uncle Blair, I love coming to Chautauqua because this is the place where I really get to see them, whereas back home I never see them and we don't really go to trips. So that's my favorite part about seeing them here, is because I wouldn't see them anywhere else, and it's good to meet up. And
Crawl space reminds me, when I was working for the surveyor, we had to survey in some pretty sketchy parts of town whenever the property was being sold. And we were doing a job one time where the house was on the property line, but we still had to measure it, so I'm crawling underneath the house in this decidedly undesirable part of town. And there was never ascertained for certain whether there was no bathroom in the house or whether they were just too sorry and lazy to make it to the bathroom. But in any case, while I'm crawling under the house with this line to measure the length of the property, someone on the first floor decided they were going to relieve themselves.
Oh, Jerry.
Quite unpleasant.
So glad you brought that up. Can we edit this tape?
And that was the day you decided to go to college.
That was the day I decided didn't go to college.
Blair, you described briefly the scene, which is the only way I can imagine describing it, the spectacle of the arrival and departure from Chautauqua with the loading of the cars and such. Do you guys have any funny or scary experiences from your travel to and from Chautauqua that you might be able to share?
I'll tell a couple incidents. One is I always thought the trip here should be an educational experience. My children weren't so sure that was the whole idea of getting to Chautauqua. So on one occasion we stopped near Oil City, Pennsylvania, which is the beginning of oil in this country, which I thought they should really understand because my father was in the oil business, and they should really understand that his first oil business was Sunoco, which was the Sun Oil Company started in Pennsylvania. Well, anyhow, we decided, I just looked on the map and I saw there's a town with an old oil drilling town, which they all went, bottomed up. They all work in the same oil seams and they ran out, I assume, called Pit Hole, Pennsylvania. So I saw this on the map, and I saw this little sign. So we drive down this kind of terrible, rutted road. Some of it was dirt, some of it was paved, for about 5-6 miles, and we finally get to Pit Hole. And Pit Hole has a sign that says, "This is where Pit Hole was." And it lasted for 2 years, and it had 1,000 inhabitants, and it's no longer here. And there were 2 foundation areas that you could look at, and that was Pit Hole. So my children thought that was a pretty amazing place, and they were really upset that we spent all that time going to Pit Hole. Another one was on the way home with our boat behind us, our boat on top, a number of bicycles on the back of the station wagon, 4 children, all the suitcases, and we ended up on Route 80, and there was a long hill up there, and the car started chugging and putting, and the thermostat went over the top, and the smoke was coming out of the front of the car, and we finally get up to the top. And there's a gasoline station there, and it had a service man there. So he was working on something, and he looked over at this. I said, "I got big trouble here." And he looked at our car and he said, "Why don't you wait about half an hour, let it cool down up, and you'll be okay." He was right. We drove these totally overloaded cars and made it back and forth. It's amazing, amazing stories in itself.
It is amazing. Any interesting experiences on the road to and from?
I would say we had, right now we have 2 of our family members bringing, marvelous boats up, fancy dancy, boats for water skiing and wakeboarding and so on. But back in the day, I used to bring a boat up here, or have one brought up. And I was trying to figure out a way not to bring it because every time I brought it, there'd be a flat tire or there'd be something wrong with it, and I'd be dragging this thing behind me. And so I tried to get, when I was over in Detroit, I would get somebody to bring it up for me. Well, that became problematic, and one time the boat didn't make it, next time we couldn't get it back, and so, my boating experiences in Lake Chautauqua have always been sort of grim and numb. It's never been robust. So I started renting the pontoon boat up here, which is, you're advertising for the Chautauqua Marina, but at least the thing was here, and I didn't have to take it in and out and struggle with it. But we've had a lot of boating haps and mishaps, I guess I would say, up here. But the trips up and back, by and large, a flat tire here or something, usually on the boat trailer. But outside of that, we did lose something off the top. I can't remember now whose bag it was, but somebody's bag that was strapped to the top of the minivan, just like, it took off, and we never saw it again.